Okay, so there we go. So good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for the community presentation on the survey results for Greenwich Together. And my name is Ellen Brazovsky, and I am the prevention coordinator for Greenwich Together, and I am the assistant director of outreach and prevention for Kids in Crisis. And so you'll see it says Kids in Crisis on my box, but because we're using the Kids in Crisis webinar, and also because Kids in Crisis does administer the grant for Greenwich Together. So you'll see too when I put my, and I'm going to put my email and the Greenwich Together website in the chat in a few minutes so that you guys could get in touch with me if you have questions after this is over, or just need more information or interested in joining Greenwich Together, which I hope some of you will be. So I'm going to turn it over. Oh, let me just go through and introduce the panelists who you see on your screen right now. So Kimberly Lissack is the clinical director of Safe Haven at Kids in Crisis, and she is an adjunct professor of social work as well at Sacred Heart University. So thank you, Kim, for being on. Deborah Katz, who is also in the Kids in Crisis box, is she is the director of outreach and community initiatives at Kids in Crisis, and also the program coordinator for Greenwich Together. Dr. Mitch Dickey is a clinical psychologist and an award-winning researcher on all things about social and emotional learning and intelligence. So we're very happy to have him here tonight. Ingrid Gillespie, who we could do none of this without, is the Director of Prevention for Liberation Programs and also the Data Committee Chair for Greenwich Together, and a very vital member of Greenwich Together. So thanks, Ingrid, for being here.
Thank you.
And Demetria Nelson is the Commissioner of Human Services for the town of Greenwich, and also the co-chair for Greenwich Together with Chief Heavey, who should be on tonight as well. He had a meeting that ran over, so he should be here pretty soon. So with that, I'm going to turn it over for Demetria to just make some opening remarks about the coalition.
Yes, thank you very much, Ellen. I would like to welcome everyone on behalf of Greenwich Together, the Greenwich Prevention Council. We are pleased to present the 2021 Greenwich Youth Survey results and key takeaways this evening. This presentation tonight is the culmination of months of collaboration with the members of Greenwich Together, its data committee, our partners in the public and independent schools, and most importantly, our student participants. We are looking forward to hearing the results and making plans to address any identified needs. Thank you very much for coming this evening.
Thanks, Demetria. So the first thing we're going to do, and when Chief Heavey comes, we'll probably pause for a minute just to let him introduce himself and say hello. But the first thing I'd like to do is just give an overview of Greenwich Together for those who may not be familiar with it. We are a coalition, a prevention coalition in Greenwich. It's been around for many, many years. It's gone through different iterations. Different agencies have led it over the years now, again, administered by Kids in Crisis. And really what our focus is on substance misuse prevention and mental health promotion, behavioral health promotion, and really looking at enhancing, building on community strengths and the well-being of the entire community, especially youth. So this survey has really looked at mental health variables as well as substance use variables, and you'll hear a lot about that tonight. But also wanted to let everyone know that in 2018 we did a similar survey that looked at assets, and as this one did too, and substance use rates. And we used that survey to plan a lot of our activities. And then because of that survey, and because of the hard work of a lot of people on the Greenwich Together Coalition, there's over 30 agencies that are organizations that are part of this, that we were able to secure a grant, a drug-free community grant. And we did a lot of work around what we saw, the results of that 2018 survey. And we see some similar results in this 2021 survey that you'll hear about tonight. And I just want to pause for a minute and just introduce John Hamilton, who is the CVO of Liberation Programs, and he has many, many accomplishments beyond that, but I will just leave it there for now, and thank John very much for joining us tonight.
Hi, Ellen. Did you add to the accomplishments that our Liberation team actually won the Greenwich United Way golf tournament that I just came from?
I
So
did
just want to
not
go on
know
record.
that, John. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Were
I
you
was late.
were
It's
you
a
a
real
part of
feeble
helping?
excuse.
Were you a part of helping them win that golf tournament?
I was in the
Oh,
foursome. I actually drove the first hole for an eagle.
oh, congratulations. Good. All right. So I was just telling people about Greenwich Together a little bit. And so I wanted to tell you a little bit about our activities, but I thought the best way to do that would be to show a short video just showing you some of the things that we have done. So can everybody see that? Ingrid, Deb, can you see it? Just give us, okay. All right, great. So I'm gonna play this video. So that's our logo, Greenwich Together. And these are just some initiatives that we did with liquor stores and parent education programs that we've put on. These are some health fairs and drug take-back days that we've done with the Greenwich Police Department. This is a farmer's market that we were at to hand out materials, same thing, the farmer's market, and trying to educate the community about prescription drug misuse, as well as many other substances. So educational pamphlets that we give out, talking about the drop box. Compliance checks, we'll talk about tonight because that's a big part of access and access to alcohol specifically. So we have a lot of resources listed on our website. We did some parent and teen focus groups after the survey. These are just some giveaways we did. We did a virtual presentation back last October with the Youth Commission. These are social media posts that we have. We also have a separate youth coalition that helps to educate and goes around to different liquor stores to talk about not selling to underage youth. And this is an example of a poster they gave out to them. And this is marijuana is something we're going to be working on in the very near future, especially in regards to vaping marijuana. This is our social host law campaign, which we're going to talk about tonight. And this is another social media ad that we have about social host law and underage drinking. So those are just some of the activities that we've done over the past couple of years, and ones that are informed by the survey results. So please, if anyone is interested or wants more information or wants to give feedback, I am going to put my email in the chat and the Greenwich Together website. So you can always go there for more resources, or you can get in touch with me through the website as well. As I said, this is being recorded. You're going to have reference to handouts, and I will be emailing handouts, the copy of the slides, and some other materials to everyone after this is over, probably later this week. So you'll get notice when the recording is posted on our website and when the handouts are there, and then you'll also get them separately in an email. At the end of this, once the webinar is ended, so we hope you will stick around to the end if you can, there will be a short survey that pops up. It's about 8 questions that just talks about if this information is helpful, what other topics you'd like to see in the future, because really this grant and our coalition is fueled by what the community needs and wants. So please give us feedback on that. I'll also probably email the survey to you if you don't have a chance to get on there. And then when you ask questions, I'd just like you to ask them in the Q&A box. If you're having trouble figuring that out, you can always put them in the chat too. Both Deb and I will be monitoring both the chat and the Q&A, so that we will have questions after the survey presentation and after Kimberly and John talk about some tips for parents. All right, so I think that was everything, unless Ingrid or Deb, did I miss something?
Yep.
All right, so I am going to turn it over to Ingrid to start the presentation on the survey results.
Okay. All right. Yeah, sorry, just all of a sudden I've got 2 up there. I want to make sure I've got, yeah. Okay, and let me go into slide mode. Okay, everybody can see that?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So Mitch and I are now going to walk you through some of the key results from the surveys that we did the youth survey in November, the parent survey in November 2020 and the youth survey in February 21. And so we're going to look at some of the prevalence, some of the what's driving some of these results, and being able to compare with some of the parent responses. So Ellen's talked about who we are and just what's critical. This data is critical to us in planning what we need to address and how we're going to address it. So it's data-driven planning. Okay, so we did in the surveys, we'll look at briefly the demographics, some of the prevalence and trends and perceptions, and brief comparison with 2018 results. And this year we asked questions around mental health. So Mitch will be able to do some highlights around those results. And then you'll walk away with kind of key takeaways. So this is our kind of our first presentation, and we really look forward to doing smaller group presentations following this. Okay, so the demographics, just briefly, as you can see on the left-hand side by gender, pretty equally split between male and female. We surveyed youths in grades 7 to 12, and I just want to put another plug in. This was a survey of Greenwich youth. We could not have done it without all the school participation. So if some of them are on listening tonight, thank you again. In terms of race and ethnicity, and I have to just move people over a bit, but basically you can see by far the demographics in Greenwich. The main group is white Caucasian, followed by Latino. Okay, we surveyed, even though it was COVID year, 2,000 over 2,800, which is close to 50%. And normally you have to do 30, anywhere between 10 and 30. But we also had a chance to do our first ever parent survey, and we asked them to respond based on their eldest child. The response number we got was great. When we talked to other communities, we had over 1,300 parents respond, so it was incredible. And we asked parents from grade 7 to 12, a couple from grade 6 responded, but you can see pretty evenly distributed in terms of grade. And then race and ethnicity, by far, again, the largest was white Caucasian, though we did get just over 7% Latino. So in 2018, we did 2 separate surveys. We had to measure what we call the developmental assets, those experience and qualities that the Search Institute has said make the difference between kids thriving or engaging in risky behavior. The more they have, the more they thrive. So that's a framework we used. We needed to measure that, and we needed to measure the risky behaviors. We had 2 separate surveys. So we learned from that, and because we couldn't do any comparison, this year we did 1 survey, we merged them. So now we could do some correlations between the developmental assets and risky behaviors and other variables. And we asked questions on mental health. When we looked at the data on prevalence by substance, sort of our initial primary level analysis is by grade and gender. And then with the parent survey, we really were looking at being able to compare some of the questions we asked, which were the same with the youth survey results. What exactly were we measuring? Through the Drug-Free Community Grant, which is a federal grant, but also through their years of research, they've said, look, if you can make a difference in these 4 core, what they call measures, if you can make a difference in the past 30-day use of kids using alcohol and or other drugs, the perception of risk, if you can make a difference in that, perceptions of parental disapproval, peer disapproval. And they say, if you can make a difference in any of those, you will make a difference in the prevalence rates, certainly for substance use, and most often other risky behaviors. So that's why we have to measure those, and we have to report on them. But we also said we believe in thriving behaviors and these developmental assets, which have been identified as, there's 40 of them. They put them in 8 different categories, and that's the handout that Ellen will email you, as well as we'll be getting it on our website. We also were measuring the comparison between youth and parents, and then looking at, we really wanted to be able to look at what factors were main factors in determining prevalence. So we looked at 30-day use, and then the second one, and we were so lucky this year to have on our committee Mitch, who has incredible experience in really deeper analysis. And that is our cluster analysis, which Mitch, can you take a few minutes just to explain that?
Sure, and I'll be very, very brief. We had 300 questions, more or less, in the survey. And even if you just did one simple correlation matrix of all these items, that would be 90,000 cells worth of information to look at. And that wouldn't even include subsetting it by gender or by grade. So we needed a way to reduce the number of data points to be able to understand the data. And so we did a few things, but then we settled on cluster analysis. And what it does is it finds groups of kids who are similar to each other. So there are a group of kids who aren't using any substances. They checked all the boxes no on those questions. And then a group of kids who's using alcohol only, and a group of kids who's using a lot, many different things a lot of the time. So when we're able to do this, then we're able to use some of those other variables like Ingrid just mentioned, to predict how that will make kids, that will be associated with whether kids use or not. So it was just a way to chunk down the number of variables to a much smaller and much more manageable group of variables.
Yeah.
And that was meaningful, that you could actually develop programs around.
Yeah. And then just briefly, can you just highlight how we looked at the mental health?
Sure. Unlike the alcohol thing, which really came out into discrete categories, the mental health, we measured depression, loneliness, and anxiety, but those are feelings of depression, loneliness, and anxiety. They're not, I'm depressed or I'm anxious. Those are not mental health diagnosis, but it does tell the kid's state of mind. And there, we didn't come out with these kind of discrete clusters. It was just really, I'm doing pretty well, or I'm doing in the middle, or I'm not doing very well. So there weren't these discrete clusters. Okay.
Okay, thank you. All right, so let's look at what we found around substance use. Okay, so as Mitch described the clusters, you can tell by far the biggest cluster, most kids fell into no substance use. And then the second largest one was alcohol only, and some might describe as more moderate use, 0 to 4 times in the past 30 days. And then alcohol only, heavier use 5 or more times, and polysubstance use, kids that are using more than one. But just by the colors, you can tell where the biggest groups were when we used the cluster analysis. But we also looked at, in terms of past 30 days, and in 2018, we showed you a similar graph. And you can tell by far that alcohol is by far the most prevalent reported substance used in the past 30 days. Again, we see marked increases between grade 11 and 12 for a variety of substances, tobacco, alcohol, marijuana, or cigarettes, and also between grades 8 to 9, grade 8 and 9s. And we do look at where we see trends and changes in that as part of our analysis for planning, but by far alcohol, most frequently reported substance. Okay, so this is the one where we looked at, there was a lot of data comparing 2018-21, but for the purpose of tonight, 2018 is blue, 2021 is, I prefer to call it gold. And if you look at, we think, wow, we're doing great. But in fact, is this because we had to measure this year in the year of COVID? Is it an effect of COVID? And it's not something we're going to know until we are able to measure again. But we also do know that national data kept coming out in terms of for groups of kids, decreased use in some of these substances, everything from because they're at home, they're not hanging out, they don't have as much access, a variety of reasons that our panelists can further explain. But the numbers are showing less use across the board. However, then we also looked at where youth are using substances because location and access has been identified as one of those predictors. And so when we looked at where kids are using, and when you look at this graph, marijuana is in red, alcohol is in pink, vaping is in blue. So wherever you see those, you know it's being used. We have a few options that we ask them: homes of other people, in your own home, versus dances, bar, restaurant during school. By far, as you can tell, just by the colors, is that homes of other people and your own home were the two places where most people, where most kids are using. And we had the opportunity to do focus groups over the summer with teens, and this was something that they also indicated. So this is where they're using, okay? But then we said, okay, what about how easy is it to access? And we looked at 2018, 2021. Red is very easy. Pink is somewhat easy. And when you look at the two, when you look at 2018 to 2021, alcohol remains fairly easy to access for many youth. You see a slight change in grade 7. These are by grades 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Then when you go down and you look at ease of access to marijuana and e-cigarettes is decreasing, but it's still fairly easy for many youth to access. And again, points verified. Now, I'm just going to ask Ellen to jump in because Ellen and Mitch had an opportunity to speak to parents over the summer about where kids are using and ease of access. And can you highlight?
Sure. So definitely parents talked about the fact that they know that there are that kids are using in other people's homes, and sometimes with parental permission and sometimes without, that the parents are maybe not home or they're sneaking the alcohol or whatever it is. So, and we also, so that's one thing. And I think we also heard from parents that they feel their own pressure on themselves from other parents, from their children, from their children's friends, whatever it is, to either provide the alcohol or to sort of look the other way when the alcohol is being used. And so what we found a lot was that parents were saying, we need support from each other and from other parents who are not allowing alcohol in their home because they know it's happening and they want to not have it happen, or, they know that other parents too are feeling pressure to host parties. So that was something that came out of this survey and the parent focus groups. And Ingrid has been working with a group to try to resurrect something that was popular in Greenwich many years ago called Fathers Forum. And that is a support group for fathers specifically, but we are looking at all sorts of ways maybe that we can be more supportive to parents in their quest to not provide the alcohol, because kids were very open about that. That's really where the use is happening. And the other thing that youth also told us that fake IDs and going into stores and buying alcohol was fairly easy. Although, we work very closely with the police, and the police are really on top of it. And one of the things that this grant funds is the compliance checks, where the police go have somebody who poses as an underage youth, goes in, tries to use a fake ID. And for those retailers who don't pass, who are non-compliant, meaning they sell alcohol to underage youth, there's education, there's fines sometimes. So those are all things that we're trying to do to decrease access.
Thank you. Yeah, because I think sort of categorically, when we look at substance use and other risky behaviors, we look at sort of two areas, access and demand, and we need to be able to address both. Demand is a lot by education and peer influence, but access is also critical. Okay, so then we said, all right, these are the rates that are happening. What is driving this? And we were looking at 30-day use and what were those kids that reported drinking in the last 30 days and those that did not. And because we were able to do deeper analysis, we did what we call a crosswalk. And we said, okay, that deeper analysis, we asked about kids that ever drank. And we looked at what are the common variables across kids that's 30-day use or ever drank and those that did not. And sort of this table really tells you, and we bolded the one that was strongest when we did the deeper analysis, the cluster analysis, and the non-drinker, the biggest variable that came through was that they were more likely to have a family that knew where they were and what they were doing. That came through sort of consistently through. The other areas where we looked at that were across board were family rules. So the kids that reported drinking said that they were less likely to have clear rules around alcohol and marijuana. That doesn't mean that parents haven't had discussions, but from from the teens' perspective, it's like, nah, we don't really have clear rules. I'm not sure where we stand on that. They haven't had any conversation in the last 3 months, and they were really less likely to avoid things that were dangerous or unhealthy or resist bad influences. Those kids that reported not drinking knew what their family rules were around discouraging drinking, generally speaking, more healthy habits and social, and understood the sense of the risk of drinking excessively or smoking marijuana, important information for them to know. And more likely, they felt that friends and family would disapprove. So, you know, these are some of these predictors that were coming through in the data. We looked at comparison. Now, there were some questions, similar questions between parents and youth, and where we could compare, we did. Interestingly enough, parents may underestimate the 30-day use of alcohol by their children in grades 7 to 9. Okay, so just a point to be made is that they may not think that there's access or that they're drinking, and some of them are. Not so much in the older grades, but in those grades. Okay, this one was interesting because they said parents overestimated the past 30-day use of alcohol by other students in their child's grades. So their child is in blue. What do you think your child's doing? How many, you know, what your child was doing, all right? And if you look at, say, grade 12, our prevalence rates were around 46%. So, you know, 47%. But when you looked at other kids, okay, they way overestimated. And as we get into the discussion, having the facts and the accurate data, having been in the schools a lot, is really important for the youth to have the accurate data, and also for the parents in terms of impacting the conversations and how they perceive use. Everybody, youth and parents, both agreed that access to alcohol tends not to be difficult and gets easier for older youth. Okay, when they looked at family, the clarity of family rules, when you look at really the higher grades 11 and 12, that's where parents thought that they were clear. The kids, no, I'm not really clear. So again, you can be having that conversation, but you may think you are, but your son or daughter may not. And again, recognizing that almost half of the youth respondents reported not having a recent family conversation about substance use. And in 2018, we talked about the research supporting talk often, you know, using opportunities, and our experts will talk more about that. Okay, so now Mitch is going to talk a bit about our results for mental health. Mitch?
Okay, so 2021 was the first time we were asking about sadness, anxiety, loneliness, and I'm really glad we did. We don't know how much of this is related to COVID or not. Other national samples are suggesting that these issues are much higher, significantly higher during COVID. But these data ought to hit you between the eyes. They are significant and in some ways startling. The average rate in the national rate of youth with any kind of diagnosis, not just anxiety and depression, is 19%, including substance use, eating disorders, all kinds of things. And these are not diagnoses. These are just feelings, right? We didn't diagnose anybody. But if you've got 40 to 70%, you know, round numbers, of your youth saying that they are very often or frequently feeling these kinds of feelings, that's alarming. I've not seen data this bad. Now, I don't know how much of it will reduce during COVID. It does mean, however, my guess is, however, that at this level, this many kids at this level, that it is impacting their academic performance. So this is not trifling. This is one of the slides in our presentation that you ought to go, uh-oh, this is not good. All right, you can see the next one. Can we get the next slide? Ingrid, is that you who's running the slide? Are you hearing? Can we get the next one?
Where'd she go? Ingrid? Oh.
Somebody? I can tell you what it says if you'd like.
Yeah, why don't you just tell us? Because I'm not sure where she went.
So there,
I'll text her.
there are boys and girl. She may be frozen. It looks like she's frozen. Ah, okay. Well,
Oh, you're muted, Ingrid.
did you freeze up, Ingrid?
Yeah, I did.
Oh,
Sorry. I'm
okay.
sorry.
It's the beauty of Zoom, right?
But I can start talking if that's okay. The next slide was going to talk about boys and girls, or rather what kinds of stress the kids are having. And there are really a couple things to say.
Oh, God.
Can you
Okay.
hear me?
Yeah, Ingrid, you're not muted now.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Mitch, we can
All
hear
right,
you.
well, why don't I just keep talking a little bit, and then if the presentation comes back on, that would be great. So we did ask them about the sources of their stress, and by far the largest sources of stress across all kids, all grades, boys, girls, 7th to 12th graders, were grades, getting into a good college, taking standardized tests, and meeting parents' expectations. And we believe that that meeting parents' expectations was about the grades, college, and the testing. But what wasn't such a big source of stress were a lot of things around the social issues. Being popular wasn't that big a deal, having a boyfriend or girlfriend, having as much money as their peers. These things were not sources of stress for a lot of the kids. And so you can also say that the girls did feel more of the social stress, and boys did feel more of the academic stress. Girls felt plenty of academic stress as well. All right, I'll wait.
Sorry.
All right, there we go. That's the slide that just talks about the high stress and some of the areas of low stress. Okay, we can go to the next one, but boys and girls are next. And this is also really disappointing. The national trends are that girls have more internalizing disorders or anxiety and depression than boys. We know that. That's not a big surprise. But this was striking, the degree to which the girls in the blue there endorsed much higher items of stress coming from the social things, right? As we said before, and much higher on sadness, anxiety, and loneliness. Much higher, in fact, yeah. And so especially older girls, you don't see that in this slide, but especially older girls are at risk. Go ahead. Now these, again, I want to just reiterate that these analyses are done with a machine learning algorithms called decision tree. It is legitimate artificial intelligence. And these are pretty clear. In other words, if you're talking about sadness, anxiety, and loneliness, and it does not correlate with feeling good about yourself, it's hard to imagine. But there are much more robust and provocative findings that we can get into in other conversations with smaller groups of people. This is the more general kinds of findings. Okay, let's take it. This is just the standardized tests, but what you see here is this is the grade slide. Parents don't see the same stress the kids do until about 10th grade. In other words, they're underestimating what's going on in terms of stress with the kids in 7th, 8th, and 9th grades. And that, I think, is interesting. Well, you see that 37% for the seniors, they've already taken their SATs, they've already submitted many of their college applications. They're no longer feeling the stress from this. But it is helpful for parents to be able to realize, even though they don't see it, these kids are stressed about their performance, academic achievement. Okay. who's ever running it, could we go to the next one?
I'm sorry, it's me, and it seems to be stuck. We're having all sorts of IT issues tonight.
Mhm.
Sorry about this. Let's see. I'm going to stop for 1
Do we
second.
want to stop for questions now, since that?
Well, there is one question. It said, I'm curious about the breakdown of student respondents, the number of boys versus girls, and the numbers by different grades.
Okay. So on the mental health side, I assume, rather than or the substance use side?
I think they were just talking about respondents in general to the survey.
So I don't even know if I'm on. Am I on?
You are,
You
you
are.
are, you are.
Okay. I'm like, I have no idea. Okay. So yeah, I'm not specific, what were they wondering? Like, this was the breakdown in terms of, in the survey, they were asked to identify by gender. I'm not
Yeah.
sure what the specific question was, Ellen.
Okay, it just said about the breakdown of student respondents, the number of boys versus girls, and the numbers by different grades. So,
Right. So we just, on the survey, we asked that, those kind of identifiers. We didn't ask names or anything like that, but we did ask gender and grade, and that's how.
okay, and that was in the beginning, that one of the first
Yeah.
slides.
So where COVID did affect was being able to, because sometimes kids were at home, some in school, and we said that kids needed to be able to take it on site. So, the week we were able to do it for grade 12 was random, and it was a particular class. There wasn't as many kids.
So that's the demographics, if you can see that. Can you guys see that slide? Okay, so those are the demographics of the youth surveyed. And again, this will be on our website and emailed to you, so you'll have the demographics.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think what the problem is when I am doing the slideshow and advancing it, I can't go to the Q&A. So Deb, you're gonna have to take over the Q&A and chat. Because if I try to do that.
Yeah, sorry, because I don't trust mine right now, so.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Okay, so where were we? Mitch, were we on this one? This was
This-
the one.
This was the one you were
right?
on. Yeah.
Mitch, you're muted.
Yeah, we had finished this one and we're on to the takeaways.
This
Yeah.
one?
Yeah.
There was
So
another
just,
question in the Q&A about the private schools versus the public schools.
Okay, thanks, Chief. And this is Chief Peavy is on. So you want to say hello
Yay.
to everyone, Chief?
Sorry, I was a few minutes late. Can't be in two places at once as much as I try.
Yes, thank you. We appreciate you being here. So do you know, Chief, when the question was, were asking about the breakdown between the public and private schools?
Right, just
Okay.
the inclusion of the private schools, because some of the people on the call might not be familiar with the fact that we've gotten participation from all the schools.
Yes. Right,
Yeah.
private and public, grades 7 through 12. So all the private schools, and the public schools participated in the survey. We don't break it down in terms of results. They just all get together. All the youth results get broken together. So it's not broken down by school. I hope that answers the question. Okay.
That was
So
the
the-
question, Ellen.
Okay.
all right. So the key takeaways from the substance use data was just for people to understand that alcohol was the most frequently used substance. And it was interesting, having been in middle schools for the last couple of months, is a number of youth do not recognize that as a drug. Doesn't mean it's bad, it's just recognizing that it is a drug in terms of its function. But it's the most frequently used one. And really the biggest determinant of substance use is by looking at the grades. So not gender, grade. The higher the grades, the higher the use, biggest determining factor. And the underestimating of alcohol use by their child in grade 7 to 9, but overestimating it certainly by other kids. So we look at that data in combination also with looking at the declarative family rules. And so how does that impact in terms of the overall perception, use, discussions, a lot of different factors. Next slide. Okay, so we showed this before, reiterating, biggest difference was families. The families knew where their kids were. That was across all grades, the biggest variable. So, and then around the clarity of family roles, but it speaks to when you're looking at the impact around family and certainly family rules, clarity, those kind of discussions, and looking at peer disapproval and just the overall sort of health and body impact. So, okay. And then we looked at the key takeaways for mental health. Mitch?
We went through this just a minute ago.
Yeah, okay. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so again, we'll get those copies. So that's in a nutshell.
I think we're all open to having you ask questions
Yeah.
that we can answer in much
Yeah.
more specificity.
We do have a question. Can you address concept of healthy versus unhealthy stress? Obviously, anxiety and depression seems negative, but can the same be said about academic stress, for example?
So
Sure.
you know what, I think maybe we might want to save that question until after the panelists talk about their tips for parents, and they might be able to address that.
Okay.
That'd be
So,
great.
Yeah, but so Deb, remind us about
Yes,
that
I will
question.
hold on to that. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing, right? Ingrid, are we?
Yeah,
So,
I apologize for the screw.
No. It's, the love of technology, right? We're all dealing with it these days. But so please, if you'd like a presentation, like if any of this has piqued your interest and you want more, or we can tailor it to any small group that would like, whether it's parents, educators, whoever. And I put my email in the chat, but it is here again, and our website is here as well.
Yeah, and just one last plug, because I'm not sure if they're on, but if you want more information on how to, questions around being involved in getting Fathers Forum up and running, we have a couple of really fantastic dads, Bobby Walker and Jonathan, and Mitch Dickey, sorry, 3. So if you email Ellen, she will connect you. Thanks.
Okay, so now we're going to turn to Kimberly Lissack, who is going to give some insight and some tips to parents around these findings.
So happy to do that. Thank you, Ellen. And I also see that there's another question in the chat, and and it's about Instagram. And wow, because I think, it's totally in line with your findings, which I was going to kind of acknowledge right off the bat. Just want to say congratulations to everybody who is involved in gathering all this information, because information is power, and your community is empowered by having this information. And the kids being part of it, Ingrid, you certainly you mentioned that when you were introducing yourself, and it's a developmental asset. It's totally lined up and linked into your developmental assets and protective factors. By doing this as a community, meeting kids where they're at in their schools, expressing to them how important they are in this process, you are expressing how valuable they are. So the message, I hope my message to the parents tonight who are on, who are participating and who participated in the surveys as well, I hope you told your kids what you're doing tonight, because that's a strong message. I value you, we value you, your community values you. It's a developmental asset, and it speaks a lot. So if you didn't tell them what you were doing, do it when you get off, because it's never too late to start talking. And that's a big part of what I'm talking about tonight as well. I think something that rang clear through the presentation and in the slides is about having those conversations, having hard conversations, starting them earlier, especially around drugs and alcohol. And I think social media right now and mental health issues as well. But certainly start those conversations younger. I think there was some, I heard and saw, Mitch, what you were saying with the slides regarding some underestimating of younger kids experiencing not just exposure to alcohol, but also the stress and the anxiety, and overestimating what some older kids are experiencing. So again, this presentation is about information. Information is power, and parents should feel empowered by getting this information from everybody tonight. It can hopefully drive conversations in your homes. So specifically tonight, I was going to talk a little bit and give some tips about how to have conversations with your kids before they go to parties, and to be prepared for being exposed to drugs or alcohol. And again, the conversation should be starting early. If you haven't done it yet, don't worry, it's not too late. Start now, but have them often, and have them have those conversations be around expectations, rules, specifically around drugs and alcohol and party behavior, and communication. So some of the things that I suggested was that you have those conversations with your kids before they're going to parties. If they're just hanging out, quote unquote, and it's not necessarily a party, have the conversation, talk about it, and probably talk about it before they're at the age where they do start hanging out, quote unquote. So that way it's not a shock, and kids are used to it, and they're developing an understanding of what's expected in the family, in your home around drugs and alcohol. Let your kids know, and this is kind of the classic, but I still incorporate it in every conversation I have with parents when we're talking about prevention and safety and children's well-being around parties specifically. But tell your kids that they can contact you at any time, in any condition, no questions asked. It's still the right thing to tell your kids. It takes away that pressure of making a bad decision and doing something desperate to get home or to hide. Just make sure that your kids know that they can contact you at any time, any condition. That's how much I care about you. Just get home safe. Establish a protocol, expectations. And again, I think there's a clear line between this concept and your findings. Establishing a clear protocol or an expectations around communication when kids are going to parties or hanging out or going to outside social affairs, especially around the phone. Your phone has to be charged. If I text you, you need to respond. If I don't hear from you within a certain period of time, here's what's likely going to happen. So that way, your kids know that there's an expectation. And again, you're communicating how important they are to you and that their well-being is essential. But having that clear expectation, I think, is really important. And then don't be afraid to ask the questions. Obviously, you have to ask questions. Like I said in the beginning, information is power, for both your child and yourself. You ask those questions. I'm going to just share recently, I had been kind of preparing to talk tonight, and something that I hadn't thought about but was probably true, and then I did it with my own teen last weekend. A question around a party, something like, are you going to be staying at that party all night, or is it possible that the party might move to another location? I asked. I hadn't asked that before. That hadn't been part of our routine. And I think I did get a funny reaction, just kind of like, what is that question about? And I thought, I think it is an important question. You don't know that your kids might start one place and then go someplace else, and you thought that they were there. Ask that question. Will you be at that same location the entire time, or is it possible that party or that gathering might be moving somewhere else? I think you should also be asking specific questions about, will there be drugs or alcohol at this gathering? And then you can have more conversation about that. You can't sugarcoat these questions. And the earlier that you start talking about drugs and alcohol and ways to manage their exposure, the more likely you are to, one, have kids who know that their parents want to be informed, which is empowering. And we've seen it has a direct correlation between possibly becoming a deterrent to actually using. And then the conversations get easier to have if you've been having them on an ongoing and consistent basis. Your kids are nervous too, and I think it's really important to remember that. that they're nervous, and this time is an exciting time, and that speaks a little bit to the healthy stress versus unhealthy stress, which we can go back to. But it is an exciting time, and and especially coming out of COVID, where there was so much isolation, I don't think we can have a conversation about mental health and substance use without having some conversation about what the pandemic did to everybody, especially our kids. And again, I want to congratulate Greenwich for taking that into consideration and for going forward during a pandemic to gather this really important information, because information is empowering, and that's exactly what you've done for the community. So congratulations to all of you. I'm happy to answer more questions specifically about the emotional and behavioral effects of depression, anxiety.
So Kim, can you just address the concept of healthy versus unhealthy stress?
Yeah,
So,
it's a good
anxiety,
question.
depression seems negative, but I think they were asking about academic stress for
Right.
example.
So I think that's a good question, I think some of my colleagues would probably get right on board with this idea. But yeah, stress is part of life, right? We all experience it, and I think some of that, the quote unquote healthy stress. When we talk about healthy stress, we're talking about kind of our bodies and our emotional reaction to a situation, a challenge. It could be a scary situation. It can just be, like I said, a challenging situation. But the idea is that there can be some healthy stress associated with that. It's exciting. We get to try and accomplish a task. There's an excitement factor there before, whether that's a test or academically, or if it's a report, or if it's a sporting event, or some kind of immediate feeling of excitement. You could say that that might be some healthy stress, but it's short-lived. It's not acute. It's not persistent. It's not impacting the functionality of that young person in other areas of their life. It's not ongoing. That's when stress is considered unhealthy. So a stressful reaction to a situation, to a one specific situation, because they want to perform, or because they are nervous about getting a good grade. I guess you could say that that could be a healthy stress. But when it's ongoing, when it's persistent, when it's chronic, and when it impacts their ability to function in different areas, that's unhealthy. So there is a pretty there's a pretty good understanding of when you've kind of crossed over into an unhealthy area of stress. But I hear what that person was asking about, and none of us can avoid stress, and it does make us, kind of feel alive a little bit. You could say, but
it can motivate us, right, to a certain point.
Sure, absolutely. We can't deny that. But when it's ongoing, when it's persistent, and when it's impacting kids' abilities to function in other areas, it's a problem.
Yeah. Thanks, Kim. So now we're going to turn to John Hamilton, and please keep the questions coming in the Q&A, because we'll have both Kim and John and Mitch and Ingrid address them as they come up. So, but John, if you want to share some of your tips for parents.
Sure. And I pretty much echo everything that Kimberly said. And I'm absolutely on board with all of that. I'll talk a little bit about the stress piece, just to chime in on that. There's this classic study, people are probably aware of, the ACEs study, Adverse Childhood Experiences, and they define what's called toxic stress. So I think that's where you can really define the difference between unhealthy stress and healthy stress. Toxic stress is this insidious, ongoing stress that stands in the way of a teenager's ability to mood regulate. And as a result, it makes them uncomfortable to be present. So much of the work you do with somebody so they aren't involved in self-medication with substances is be comfortable in their own skin and learn how to ride out that stress, mood regulate. And in the ACEs study, the key protective factor, even if you had a horrible experience of childhood trauma, is to have one consistent supportive adult in your child's life. So my pitch tonight is, why not it be you? Why not it be your parent? Or it could be a teacher, or it could be a law enforcement officer, or a coach, or a counselor, or somebody that gives that kid the message that they are capable, that they are lovable, and that they can connect to others. So that's a pretty much simple definition of mental health. You got to feel lovable, you got to feel capable, and you got to feel connected to your community. And your first level of community is your family. And if your family might have troubles of their own, resilient kids will adopt a family next door or a friend's family, and they'll get what they need from another family. So that's a key piece, is you can actually work on these assets and build resiliencies in your family and promote them by promoting your kids getting out of their comfort zone, taking positive risks with social competence, having empathy, learning how to be able to experience their feelings and have empathy for others' feelings, have a sense of humor, not take themselves so seriously. That's a great resiliency skill that allows them to even laugh at themselves. Have problem-solving skills, have a sense of autonomy, know that if their life is good, take credit for it. If it isn't, do something different, be the agent of change in their life, have agency, build self-efficacy, build a sense of purpose. These are all important. As Kimberly said earlier, you have to meet your kids where they are. And what is so tough for some parents sometimes is to be able to meet them where they are means that you have to be a reasonable parent based on who your kids are, not who you want them to be. We did focus studies years ago in Westport. Greatest stressor in the community, the kids felt, were the expectations of their parents. So it's great to talk about, as Mitch had talked about, having this understanding of what the expectations are for your kids, but that has to be tempered with those expectations being reasonable. Are you a reasonable parent? So I even mentioned, as like Ellen's like, hey, how about some conversation starters? Yeah, here's a conversation starter. Hey, I went to this Zoom tonight that Ellen was running, and it scared the hell out of me. And they presented all these results, and there's more substance abuse going on in the school than I knew of. I guess I'm pretty clueless, right? And by the way, you want to own that, because the more you own your powerlessness, the more you're authentic to your kids, because your kids know you're clueless, right? So be more humble. Don't think you know everything, because you probably don't, especially when it comes to your kids' life. But take an interest in taking them seriously, understanding their friends, their social media, everything they do, to take a genuine interest in listening to them and affirming them for who they are. So you basically want to ask them, I hope you can talk to me about what's going on in your school and your life. I hope you know that there's nothing you can tell me as your parent that is going to have me love you any less. That sounds like an obvious statement to most adults here in this call, but I can tell you, in my work as a family therapist, it blows kids away to actually hear that and believe that. And oftentimes they don't believe that. They do believe that their parents are disappointed in them in some ways, or they're ashamed by some of what's going on in their life, and they're afraid to talk to their parents about important issues where their parents can be their lifeline and they don't have to rely on their peer groups, right? So let them know that you have faith in them, that you believe they'll make the best decisions available to them at the time with the choices that they have. But let them know also, ask them how you could be helpful and what you can do to show them that you believe in them and that you have faith in them. Another conversation starter could be, hey, I listened to the Zoom meeting again tonight, and they pointed out that it's important to know where we stand, parents stand, with regards to substance use in a family. So just want to check in to see if you're clear on where we do stand on these issues, and let's open it up for some discussion. And I want to also know where you believe I stand. Do you think that's reasonable? That is an empowering discussion to have your kids speak up for what they believe. It doesn't mean that you may not push back and not sign off on what they think is reasonable with regards to their use of substances. However, you're going to have an authentic, real conversation, and it's not likely they'll go underground. And as I talked about meeting people where they're at, and Kimberly talked about this, strike while the iron is cold. Don't wait until they're walking out of the house to that party. Have it in a conversation when you're getting along, when you're sitting next to them in a parallel relationship, and that'll make a world of difference as well. This Block study years ago talked about psychological health and substance use with kids. The greatest predictor, again, goes back to parents that were reasonable, where parents, they were consistent but reasonable in their kids' eyes, versus parents that had rigid boundaries, that kids went underground, or parents that had no boundaries at all, and they oftentimes had many issues with substance use. Lead by example, be authentic. I talk about a family meal. It's probably late tonight, 8 o'clock. If you're having a late dinner after this Zoom, you say, hey, let me tell you what an ass I made of myself at work today. I was in this meeting and I leaning back in my chair and I fell back on my butt. It was so embarrassing. You're more likely for your kid to say, you think that was embarrassing, Dad? You should have seen what happened to me in school today. or, on the Zoom call. And now you're having an authentic conversation. The more you show your humanness, the more you're lovable, the more you'll be able to connect to your kids, because oftentimes, particularly in this community in Greenwich, your kids are seeing an end product of some success. They don't see how you sucked along the way and you stumbled through your humanness. That's what they need to see to give them hope. It's paradoxical, but it's so real for you to be able to say, I had a bad day even today, or let me tell you about what an ass I made of myself in high school at this dance, or something that allows them to give them permission to be able to talk to you and feel like you can relate to them if they're struggling in their own skin as well.
So,
Thanks.
so John, we have a question that I think you can answer, but they also would like Chief Heavey's input in this.
Okay.
So now that recreational marijuana has been legalized, as a parent, I'm very concerned that kids will think it's a natural way to address anxiety. Though kids may feel short-term stress relief. Oh, what happened to that question? It disappeared. Well, basically,
I'm sure we get the gist. Yeah.
yeah, well, basically, they want to know, the question disappeared, but they want to know the response to the legalization of marijuana and its impact on kids, and kids be using it even more to handle stress and anxiety, and how parents should respond to what's happening out there.
I'll jump in and then I'll turn it over to the chief. One of the issues with what I always talk about it's the same thing with alcohol. It's not being able to be present, right? Your inability to be present. And if you're using marijuana, you're using alcohol, whatever you're using that's a substance, is not allowing you to be fully present in your life. That's a problem. You're going to rely on that. The other biggest issue is we know the brain doesn't fully develop till 24 and 25, right? 24 for women, 25 for men, 40 for some men. We'll talk about it in Father's Forum later, but that's another issue. What we have now, though, is the understanding that exposure of that level of THC to the brain early on is going to hardwire the neuroplasticity for a reward dopamine kick that's probably going to override other reward dopamine kicks that are more sustainable, like gratitude and love in a person's life, and human connection, right? That connection becomes so cool, so important, and so key. And it's another thing about even the concern that we had that with the COVID issues, we were going to have this, people do drugs for two reasons: to feel good and feel better, right? During COVID, not too many people were doing drugs to feel good. Most people would say they wanted to feel better, but here's the difference. It's like Israel has the lowest incident of PTSD. Why? Because everybody in Israel has to have a shared experience of going into the military. Everybody, all these kids, as disconnected as they were, it's a shared experience of their social isolation and despair. So in an ironic kind of way, it built community and connection that didn't have so many people have to feel like there was such a sense of feeling so alone and different than everyone else. But that said, yes, some kids use marijuana as an anti-analytic. Short term, it works until it doesn't, and it'll turn on them. And just like anything else that isn't allowing you to kind of naturally be able to mood regulate, you can't rely on it. It'll be a real problem. And parents need to see that this marijuana today that has THC that's 70 to 80% pure is not their marijuana or their parents' marijuana or their grandparents' marijuana or whatever. It's a very different experience. We don't have any longitudinal studies on the long-term impact, but we know it's going to be something bad. Chief, it's on you.
John really covered a lot of what I would have said about the brain development till 25, and it adds a new element to us is that, well, it's okay, it's okay for adults to do it, so it should be okay for me. And that part is really a challenge when you're trying to explain reasonable boundaries. So it is a challenge, but I think part of that too is, again, and it's been mentioned more than once already by Kim and some of the other people, is that we have to be like a team approach to this. Everyone has to be on the same, kind of the same message that this isn't a good thing for you to do. So again, for me, and again, talking about having that engagement with your children, and of course, with their permission, they're both adults now. I did get a call on occasion and come get me, and in a situation that was uncomfortable. And I'm very proud of the fact that they were willing to do that and made that conversation always acceptable. Now, not every kid gets picked up in a police car, but they probably had other challenges and stressors because of their being my kids. But we're all parents, and it is hard to set that good example and to make the time for that conversation that sometimes will be at the most inconvenient time. So we have to be able to put our own adult personal stressors down when they want to talk about something. And it may be about nothing more than just being present and engaging about something that's not important, or at least doesn't seem like a big important thing, but that might be just the opening of the communication, and then that important factor might come out. So you have to really, be ready for that at any time. And again, the legalization of marijuana, I got kind of chastised in the media for coming down against it, but I think it's not going to be a positive thing for anyone, regardless of how much tax it might generate. I've seen the studies of Colorado and Massachusetts who have legalization and how it's changed the visits to emergency rooms. And one of the challenges in several children's hospitals is the significant increase of mental health admissions to emergency rooms of children. And it certainly is part of besides COVID, is also some of the substance use.
And the driving under the influence causing more fatalities in Colorado. We have the data, and we really are concerned about its impact on young adults driving.
Yeah, we still don't have a field sobriety. We have a thing called a DRE, drug recognition expert. The state is now trying to fund, and this is a very difficult thing to become certified in, to give us additional drug recognition experts. But we have to send them out to Arizona. They have to spend time at a prison to learn how to look for drug use. But we can't train every officer in as far as alcohol impairment. That's something that we have a test, a field test, and we have a method to validate that. But for marijuana and other drugs, we don't have that. Somebody comes out with that, that's going to be a valuable tool, but I don't see it coming out in the near future.
Thank you. We have another question. What are the assets that were low, especially in 7th and 8th grade, and what can parents do to help build them at younger ages?
Seems to me that that's a very important question, and one that when we do secondary presentations, we can dig down into in real detail and with real substantive answers, but we may have some answers tonight.
Unfortunately, I think Ingrid is frozen again. Her connection is not good, but she would be able to tell us, a little bit more about which assets in 7th and 8th grade. But just in terms of developmental assets, either Kim or John, what can parents do to sort of build those assets, especially among younger elementary, middle school kids? Kim, you want to take that, or?
Yeah, I mean, I can build off of so much of what John had to say too, but those meaningful, they're creating meaningful and authentic opportunities with your kid to build empathy, whether that, I thought, it was very interesting because I thought that piece about the stress and the anxiety that the kids were saying they felt about standardized tests and grades and colleges. So my response to that is kind of helping children define themselves in positive ways that's separate from grades and tests and colleges. So get them involved in meaningful community activities, get them involved in meaningful family activities, charitable work, volunteer opportunities, quality time. All that stuff matters. It really does. And it makes kids feel better about themselves. And there's so many opportunities to do that, but I think that's really important. And that kind of connection to a greater good is a tremendous protective factor and developmental asset. It's internal, and we want that. We want those internal protective factors strengthened, and we want the external protective factors straightened. The community is trying to do that. The parents and the families inside their homes need to be the ones who are doing that with their kids, and it happens in those really important, authentic, meaningful moments and shared experiences. So, I keep trying. I think I can't say enough about that.
Thanks, Kim. John, did you want to add anything to that? Or?
Yeah, I agree with Kimberly. Encourage your kids to take positive risks, get out of their comfort zone, find their tribe, find their community, do community service, feel part of something greater than themselves. You need to really be able to do this while they're at this kind of precipice risky behavior by that 7th, 8th, 9th grade, if they felt community and they're starting to feel more comfortable in their own skin in a reasonable way and more accepting of themselves and others, you're going to make the work easy for years to come. The other piece that I always have to throw out there is you also, from the adult's perspective, what you can do is enjoy your mate more than your kids. And the chief said it really well earlier, which includes all of us here. We need to enjoy each other and have each other's back and be a united front, like a family of a full community of a family in Greenwich, everyone working together, not undermining each other, splitting each other. That's what's going to keep our kids' world safe.
To that point too, we have some parents who honestly believe that they're doing the best, safest thing for their children by providing alcohol at a party where they take keys and they, I'd rather them do it here than in somewhere else, illicit. But I think, sorry about that.
There's somebody doing it now.
Yeah. But that united front and challenging and questioning where, and it was mentioned before, I want to know where you are, and you're going to a second party afterwards. Do you have a bag of clothes to change into different clothes that you're leaving my house with? Those are all things, like I said, I always wanted to know where my son or my daughter were going and when they were going to be home. And like I said, remind them that they could come and get me. But I also expected those other parents to be part of the team that kept my kids safe. Now, occasionally things happen, and we've seen lots of youth who've been stand up about a situation where they're having a few friends over, a bunch of other kids uninvited or heard about it socially and show up and they bring alcohol and they've called us. And I feel good that they're willing to call us because they don't want to, their families have so much to lose if they let that happen. So that acknowledgement of that as well, that the parents really have much more to lose if they do create an environment where they allow alcohol or drugs in their home, and they're not really doing, your children want parents. They don't need more friends. They want more parents. And you're going to miss out on that.
And to that point, Chief, there was focus groups we did in Darien, and it was unbelievable how, again, this is that peer pressure that was referenced earlier, that parents feel the pressure of having to be the cool parents. Well, here's the interesting thing in the focus groups in Darien. The kids that we spoke to said that these parents that think they're cool and they were actually serving them wine and alcohol at their house, they found as creepy and cringy, and it wasn't cool at all. And so we tried to shift that messaging to let the parents know you're being cringy, not cool. And they need to really redefine that idea of being the cool parent, as you say, and not a friend. It's good to be friendly with your kids. You're not their friend. Have some boundaries, get a life, enjoy your mate more than your kids, which, by the way, means even if you're a single parent, get a life outside your kids. Kids have 2 jobs, just to receive love from you and learn from you. It's not their responsibility to have you feel special and loved. That's what therapy is for. If you don't have anybody in your life today, or find a partner or a puppy, but don't impose that on your kids.
And, overall, I think being a parent is hard, right? And so, as everyone has said, we need to lean on each other. We need to use the resources in town, Greenwich Together, the police, the Kids in Crisis Helpline, Human Services has a number of services for, just to lean on each other and provide support for each other, because parenting is probably the hardest job in the world and comes with no instruction books. So the more we can do too, as Greenwich Together, to help inform and provide information and support to parents, that's really what our goal is. So I don't.
I agree. Ellen, I just wanted to just grab onto that what Chief was saying, and John as well. That concept of, I'd rather have the kids drinking in a safe place where I know it's the definition of a mixed message. And that's the last thing that you want to do around something as dangerous as drugs and alcohol. Everything is about being consistent, and your data shows it. Consistent, clear messages and understanding about your family's values around drugs and alcohol. And then to say, well, I'm allowing them to drink in my house and their friends as well, because I'd rather have them be here than drink someplace else. It's the mixed message. It couldn't be more classic in terms of mixed message and an unhealthy message.
Yes, thank you very much for that. Those are great points. Any other questions, Deb, before we end?
And let me see. I think one more question may have come up.
Okay.
No, I think we have them. I think we covered them all. So, oh, wait, no, one more.
Did
Um,
Commissioner Nelson want to say something? I thought I said earlier she wanted to chime in on a question, or you're good.
Who? I'm sorry, John.
Demetria.
No, I'm good. Thank you very much.
No, the last question was that there have been some excellent points being made. So we're all good.
And again, all these tips and points that both Kimberly and John and Mitch and Ingrid and Chief have all given us tonight, I will email out to all the people who registered. So you will have these as reminders going forward as well. And the Greenwich Together website has many resources as well too. So I think that is it for tonight. Please, once we end the webinar, there will be a survey that pops up. Please just take the time to if you're still on, to complete that. And Demetria and Chief, if you have any closing remarks as the co-chairs of Greenwich Together, please close us out tonight.
Just want to
Okay,
say thank you. You know, you're not alone, and don't feel like that. You've got lots of people on a team, and like I said, it's a challenge. I said, probably as hard as my job is as a police officer for the last 35 years, the bigger challenge has always been being a parent. I've only been doing that for about 22 years. I'm still not perfect at it, but you know, I think that you know, parents and other adults that can make positive influence. You know, I was at a scout meeting the other day, and one of the scouts was asking about the mentorship program that the police department does at Western, and we just started at Central. And you know, it gives me that wow, that they're actually talking about that's something that somebody was looking forward to. You know, and again, with COVID, we've had some hiccups with continuity for that, but we're getting back to it. So you know, use this as a resource. We're definitely there and available, and you know, go home and hug your kids, and even if they ask, well, what's up with this, you know, it's okay. Then hug them even harder. It's work. It'll pay dividends later on. So.
Yeah. Thank you. No, just wanted to say thank you to everyone, to all of our panelists for coming out and really making this an engaging discussion, not just a presentation of all the information. I'd like to thank all of our participants who submitted questions and all of the wonderful tips that you have recommended and suggested for everyone. I think we all could, you know, take a moment and, you know, realize that honesty, participation, expressing empathy, you know, for others will just serve us well, especially when it comes to engaging into these, you know, very difficult conversations. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thanks.
You too, Ellen. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.